Welcome to Peter's podcast, where we talk about real yoga, actual happiness, and deep living. Thanks for joining me. Hey, Wendy.
Hi there.
Namaste.
Namaste. I was just doing a little bit of centering.
Yeah, a la Rick Rubin.
A la Rick Rubin.
Take a moment to breathe before you begin your project. Excellent advice for any kind of project. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh once said, when I got to see him in person, that at his Plum Village, he had given instructions to all of the admin staff that when you hear the phone ring, you use the phone's bell as a reminder to pause and take a breath.
Yeah.
And then answer the phone.
Yep. Yeah, that pause is pretty much paramount.
Mm-hmm. Super trick. Good to use in all your activities.
Yeah.
And so today we're talking a little bit about tricks that are good to use in your activities.
Yeah. Yeah, and all that your activities entail.
Mm-hmm.
Those things that we like and are driven towards, act out around and want more of, and also those things that we reject and don't feel good and that we want to argue with or fight with or run away from, or whatever those responses or reactions might be. And I really have been thinking about that a lot, like how do we just, not think that we can transcend this screwed up wacky place that we find ourselves in, and rather be in that place in a way that is somewhat self-regulated or together or intentional in some way. So that's kind of where I stand on some of those.
Yeah. And we got the notion to talk about this from an article that I read and posted in Facebook from the New York Times, editorial by David French that's called "The Boy Who Cried Hoax." That's a little bit about the standard method that the press and the administration are using to sort of redefine reality. They keep talking about things that, like, if you're paying any attention to the typical news, you're hearing things one way, and then you hear what comes out of the mouths of this whole system, and it's so off that you just can't believe it. And it gets a little frustrating for me because there seems like then there is no way to talk about it because there is no agreeable truth. So
agreed upon.
Yeah, agreed upon. There's plenty of it, and there's no agreeable truth. So
it
can't be agreeable to either side of a question. So what David French, who's if you don't know him, he's a former, he's still a very conservative socially and financially conservative person who had a career in the military as an attorney, a JAG officer in the military, and he's been very concerned about what goes on in our current society,
yep,
despite living in a very red zone of the country and knowing a lot of people who are sort of believing or part of this whole thing. And so he talks about the way this redefining is happening, and he boils it down to 4 basic steps that play out time and time again, which I think is useful. Anytime you can see a pattern, the pattern will often play out many ways. And if you are looking always at the ways or the individual instances of things, it can become overwhelming quickly.
Yeah.
But if you identify the pattern that's taking place and you just see, this is one more episode of this pattern, it's a little easier to hang on to and not get overwhelmed with. Mm-hmm. So that's why I found this quite useful. So he says that the way that these stories are getting spun, like the Russia story in response to all of the constant barrage of questions about Epstein, is a perfect example of what he's doing every time. And the pattern is, step 1, redefine the scandal on the terms most favorable to him, right? So you work with the media and whatnot to keep pushing your way that you want to talk about this issue.
Just relentlessly.
Yeah. And then this number 2 is to lie relentlessly. So lying relentlessly, you never give any other way of spinning the story any airspace, right? So the lie is constantly filling the airspace. Number 3 is that you ignore genuine concerns. So like if something was coming up around the thing, it always becomes about whatever the scandal and the misidentification and all of that. It never gets down to the actual content of the thing. So that stuff gets ignored.
Right, like people are outraged about sexual abuse.
Right, in the Epstein situation or in the Russia situation, which he's using to kind of cover over it now. He's accusing Obama of treason,
right.
Which is like taking away any investigation we might do into how Russia is actually influencing our elections, which is common knowledge among the intelligence community. Yeah, and then number 4 of this 4-step process is reverse the villains. In other words, you take what people are accusing you of and then turn it around and make someone else the villain in this same story. Yeah. And so by this relentless lying then and continuing to reframe and on and on and on, you get to this same kind of pattern over and over again.
Yeah.
So you had heard me talking about this earlier and came up with some ideas about what to do about this from a yogic practice perspective.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I just want to say before we go anywhere is that just as you were describing these 4 things, which, I haven't read this article and yet I'm all too familiar with these 4 things as a pattern of deflection and reality spinning. But just as you were saying what was... this content, I was noticing my shoulders start to tense and I was picking up your tone and feeling. By the end of listening, I was just kind of sitting on my hands and like concentrating really hard, and I actually felt like my whole body came into, like I could feel my adrenals and my kidneys kind of start to seize up, and I was just really not breathing. And so I'm just wanted to reflect that because I think it's really, really fundamental to some of like the most basic ways that we can sort of stay in our own navigational empowerment, if that's a word to use here, or just autonomy, or protected space, that noticing how we are reacting unconsciously or maybe even within some part of our awareness, not just like our thoughts about something, but just like actually like our autonomic nervous system and our like maybe we're even like not digesting our food, we're getting activated, we're just sort of basic things, and then like what we can bring to it, like how we can use our like most sort of, or maybe it's not simple, maybe we can use all of the tools of yoga that are available to us in some ways, like just kind of keeping in mind this reminder, like that Thich Nhat Hanh, when you hear the phone ring, pause, take a breath, when you hear the news start to come in, pause, take a breath. You're not gonna, whatever. That's like, let's pause there for a sec.
Yeah.
I just did want to mention one thing before I forget, because I'm gonna forget. Like you were talking about how these 4 things, it's a pattern that we notice over and over again, and there's a pattern to it. and there's also like the different instances of that expression of that pattern. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to mention, maybe we'll circle back to it somewhere, that works both ways. We can also notice patterns that work for us and remember to do that, like the breathing, like the pausing, right. like the tuning in and knowing what your body's doing. Those are also patterns that we can establish as a kind of like an antidote pattern. But we need to do the establishing. So I just wanted to mention that like each individual expression will be different for each person in the community, but what we sort of learn together as yogis or sort of tap into as yogis can be part of like a larger like sort of pattern of how we see life, how we see truth, how we see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And there's a line in the Bhagavad Gita that's talking a bit about attachment, and attachment is a funny word because it sort of sounds like we want something and we become attached to it, like I'm looking for a new toy and I want that new toy or this new piece of clothing or something like that. But also attachment can be to things that we want to have be a certain way, right? So we become attached to, say, our worldview our sense of what's reality. And the thing
our
is,
narratives, our stories, who am I,
exactly.
identity.
And the flip side of attachment is that not you being attached not to something you want, but something you don't want, right? I don't want this to be. So the line in the Gita that I think is relevant here is that attachment leads to an anger, right? Like when you're attached to something, it will get to anger when you don't get that thing.
Yes.
And anger then changes your ability to think straight.
Yep.
Right? And so when you're angry, you're not thinking straight, and then you're acting in a way that may or may not be the best thing to do because you're no longer having full access to your discernment and your intuition. Rather, you're clouded in your judgment. And so you're acting from that place. So this is all to say there's a lot going on right now that is messing with us. And so we need tools to help us to come back to center, not as a way of bypassing what needs to get done, but as a way of being in the right space to do whatever it is that we're going to do.
That needs to be done.
Which could be taking care of your family. It could be whatever, it could be whatever it is that you think is the best thing to do from your place of right discernment.
I so agree with you. I also just want to say that I think this might be true for a lot of people, but it is definitely true for me. When my fear place gets activated, I often experience it as anger. Mm-hmm. And when I'm angry, if I sit with what I'm angry about, which is not always easy because, it's kind of like might take a little while to figure out what you're angry about, and it could just be like something incidental that has more roots than you thought. It often gets traced back to fear around one thing or another that turns out to be like something that's, not so apparent. Mm-hmm. And I just think that I just experience a lot of that sort of reactive contraction happening in people, in myself included, that I think is really, very, I just really couldn't agree with you more, but I just wanted to add that. Like this anger in the Gita, evident, it's anger, but it's also related to a lot of other types of emotional reactions that may or may not be conscious and may or may not be related to what's actually happening that you heard that you got angry about.
Right. Yeah, that's very much true, right? The unconscious stuff that gets triggered by something that's going on in front of you.
Yeah. And we all have that going on. It doesn't have to be like trauma with a big T that everybody loves to talk about, but it could just be like your story and how it's like kind of screwing with your story, as you said.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, this is a time of disruption for sure. And so all of our stories are a little bit being challenged.
Yeah.
Yes, either a little bit or a lot. Like if you're getting shipped off to another country, that's
yeah.
it's a gigantic...
Or you're just really angry about that
Yes.
because it is just outrageous.
Yeah.
And that outrage is attached to something in you that you identify with also.
Right.
So it's not, like, this is actually a really good point. So it's not about not being outraged about something that's going on for other people in the larger community. And it's not about being outraged, right? It's just about, there's, like, we're allowed to have our position, and yet we don't have to stick to that position for the reasons that we think we should, right?
Yeah.
Like there might be some movement or some ability to shift your position, even if it's just to see that, like, I don't physically in this moment control like somebody in Albany that's getting targeted. Right. Even though I might know about it and it might outrage me justifiably. Right. Right? That the pull to do something about it might not be, I mean, this goes to everything. I mean, you could talk about, like, anything. It could be, like, close to home, or it could be like Gaza, or, like, this coming to this realization that, people starving as a result of, political intervention and war is just wrong, period. It's just wrong. And what can it's like we just get very, like, our fuses get blown, if we cannot process that information and that reality. And then throw on top that it's being deliberately obfuscated, makes it even more
right. And
hard.
That's, I think, where some of the outrage can come in too. And so there's a like a truism kind of an idea or a statement of destination or outcome, where I've heard this from Alan, I've heard it from other people as well, that you are naturally going to have emotions, you're naturally going to have reactions, but those emotions can really own you, right? You can be overwhelmed by it. And in fact, we were just watching we are rewatching the TV show Scandal, which is like one scandal upon another. And the episode yesterday, the president and his wife have lost their son, and the wife is distraught, of course, right? And she's become not functional at all. And so the other character who's trying to get her to appear at something that she hasn't, the wife has no intention of appearing at, she brings up, hey, other people lose their kids. Other people don't have the luxury of just being sad,
wearing Uggs and eating potato chips on the White House lawn,
at the grave, forever. Yeah, because they have to get back to their job, right? You have a job too, and your job is to be the first lady and to attend this event, right? So it was like a real call to, yes, you can have your emotions, but when they start to own you, when they start to move you out of the possibility of acting in your best role, interest and your role, which gets back to the Bhagavad Gita again.
Just thinking of that.
This idea of you have a role in society to fulfill, right? Then at that point, you have to do a kind of intervention with yourself, right? You have to come to the place where you go, this is not, I cannot continue to work this way. And these are those moments, and often they're described as like, I hit rock bottom, right? Yeah. I came to that point where there's no longer any more sadness I can have. I have to turn a corner. And so I think that's kind of where we are a little bit with this. And I've had a little bit of I hesitate to call them arguments, but in a way they are real arguments with people who are reacting to what's going on in different ways. You know? Because I think that there's a place where we find ourselves right now. A lot of the reaction to what's going on is this outrage and this feeling of we need to do something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's valid. We do need to do something, but the outcome of that thing that we can do right now is not necessarily going to resolve the problem right now, because from just a reality standpoint, there's not that many places where things can change given the way the circumstances are stacked at the moment. Yeah. So to let oneself get utterly distraught over that is to waste is the wrong word, but squander energy.
Yeah.
Right? Knowing that you're as soon as or whatever you can at the moment do something effective, then that's the right time to do that thing that's effective.
I want to just bring in that one of the ways that we can blow a fuse is by feeling like we need to do something and, you know, squandering our energy on just whatever that outlet happens to be reactively. But also there's the other side of that, and they really are partners and they kind of go together, is like collapsing and feeling like you can't do anything. And, you know, what happens with Melly on Scandal, the first lady, is, you know, she ends up wearing Uggs, which is so out of character, and eating potato chips and just like really not being able to function, which happens with us. And it to me, it's like speaks to both sides of the nervous system. And if you can sort of see where you're going, I feel like there's a certain gentleness that has to be applied in both, like however you're activated, or like frozen, that you know, if you know your patterns around these things in general, it's easier to sort of give a little grace and to back up out of it slowly and to say, here's what I'm remembering and here's coming back to center and what that feels like. And there might be like a shift moment or like an adjustment period, or there might be something that snaps you out of it. Like, I was just thinking that, you know, it's funny just to go through this show, Scandal, you know, like that in that episode, after she gets up and goes to the State of the Union speech, and she puts on a dress and she shows up and people sort of acknowledge her grief, she leaves that event, goes home, and that's when she actually has a release moment, an emotional release. She ends up sobbing on the floor. And when we were watching, you were like, now she's feeling it.
Now she has her grief.
Now she's feeling her grief.
Yeah.
And that's kind of also how it happens. Like, if you just get triggered by something that's going on in the world, like just this diet that's like, there's no filters of what's coming in, and you're walking around like in your stuff, and then you just realize that usually there's this moment of like, oh, I finally felt the thing that was mine to feel, not all this other stuff, you know. So it's like you have to keep yourself, you know, you use your yoga practice kind of keep yourself functional.
Right.
I mean, it seems so ridiculous that it would be so hard to just remain functional in this environment, but really, guys, I feel like this is the deal. Like, we are not, you know, nobody here is above this. Like, we are all in this. And when you say, like, you know, being in this kind of, you know, navigating in this way, using your practices helps you to be able to act with discernment. Like, I feel like in my own life, never has this been more of a reality, you know. It's like the felt sense of walking a razor's edge is very palpable right now for me anyway. And I feel like, you know, these are things that we need to sort of, you know, it's easier for me if I pay attention to the nuts and bolts of what I need to do. And, you know, whatever.
That actually makes me remember something that I thought was kind of metaphorical to what we're doing right now, and that is like when someone has a health problem, right, and is really knocked down by that. All of a sudden, the entire perspective shifts. It's no longer all the things that you had to do and all the deadlines you had to meet and all the responsibilities that you had. The main thing you have to focus on is like, can I eat? Mm-hmm. Can I take a walk around the hallway of the hospital that I'm in? And oh wow, I accomplished the whole walk around, right? It's like all of a sudden the perspective of what it is that you're capable of taking on shifts.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people right now, there is a tremendous amount of feeling of loss and grief and disbelief. And so being able to get through a day and notice the other things that are important is what we can do right now, like to live, right? You called out a line from a song. I was spinning a disc on vinyl earlier today up at some old
we had a good
group.
little dance party this morning.
Yeah, some song by Three Dog Night, I think, right? And it was like, I can't listen to you anymore. I have too much to do in my life.
I have to live my life. Something like that. We should really.
I think the song was by Traffic, but it was being covered by Three Dog Night.
Yeah.
But
we'll post it in the show notes.
Yeah. But it's true that we have life to live too.
Yeah.
So we can't keep listening to lies and let that keep us from living our life.
Yeah.
And
which is a form of what's the word that I was trying to come up with before? Non-capitulation. Like that's a form of non-capitulation. I think it's a really significant form of it, especially for.
What do you mean by non-capitulation?
So there's this feeling, and David French's article refers to it, that we're like sort of in this sort of inexorable slide towards some form of authoritarianism, and we don't really have, it's like just this feeling of that's where we're going. And a lot of people who are sort of more on the side of like activism and doing something about it and, organizing. I don't know if the word that is being used is non-capitulation, but it's like this idea that we have to not give in to this,
right?
Internally or externally,
right?
Like sometimes it comes down to if you're somebody who's more of an activist, it comes down to for you like. If somebody comes for, if ICE comes for my people in my workforce, I'm going to stand up to them. Or I'm going to do some action that addresses it. I'm not going to capitulate. Mm-hmm. But there's also this other idea of capitulation, for me anyway, that's about like not accepting the lies in my own inner realm. I don't have to capitulate. One way that I can capitulate to this is like by kind of just collapsing and never getting back up again, mm-hmm. or by burning myself out and freaking out all over the place, mm-hmm. Or just ignoring it somehow, like walking around and saying it's like fine, it's not my problem.
Right.
So, those are things, those are all capitulations at some level, maybe a more subtle level, a more internal level. But if you are, and this I'm pretty sure has come up in every time in history that this has happened, to go back to the sort of archetype or the overarching, pattern, this expression of that is pretty gnarly, and we're in it. And I'm pretty sure nobody who's, been living in this kind of like, capitalist bubble of America for the last however many years has experienced this particular moment. It's pretty darn shocking. Yeah. And we do have to use our tools and practices. And one of those things is to know that, the way that I establish, I don't know, there's a piece here for me that's also about, how I see the world, right? That I, as a tantrika, as having that tantra philosophy available to me, I understand that the mind that processes sensory information and just information in general and relational stuff is also not the be-all and end-all of the navigational tool that I have available. I know that might be like a little bit grand or something, but I do feel like in that pause, I have to remember that I'm part, like that I have a perspective and that everybody else that is a sentient being has a perspective. And if I just think that perspective is wrong, I've lost the thread for myself, right?
Yeah.
But my job is to stay with the truth as I see it from my particular perspective.
Right.
And try and stay sort of whole and safe within that so that I can do the actions that are available to me.
Right.
Right? I can make a difference in whatever sphere I can make a difference, but I can't do it. And then we're back to that.
And then there's another whole can of worms that your statement just opened up, for me at least, which is that knowing you have a perspective and that on a certain level there are other perspectives, and to take it all the way back to that tantric notion of like awareness, right? Consciousness playing out on this stage of life, all the possibilities, and letting them then interact so that life is like a grand scheme, a grand drama, a grand dance, right? Is useful to remember when you're encountering the other, right? Because the other also feels just as certainly that they are acting with the truth and they are acting with what is right and they are expressing their own values and are justified in doing so. So as we progress through what's going on right now, it's going to be very important, I think, and I hope that this article is like a harbinger of that boy who cried wolf thing, that eventually people will recognize that this is the pattern that's going on, and this adult boy is calling hoax over and over again when there is no hoax, right? And we'll finally start to change, and we're going to have an unconditional love for them too, that allows not lies to influence us, but acceptance to create another chapter, a chapter in which both are involved and both are valued, right? Because otherwise you're just like flipping one confusion for another. You're lacking respect in both directions.
I agree. Yeah, that's what.
And that's been really hard for a lot of people who feel like they're being lied to. And
because they feel like they're being lied to, and because they also feel like they're losing something that they had. The when you were talking about walking around the hospital, without going into the story, you and I do have an experience of this, and we sort of, we see in our own life how that can happen, and then there can also be life. Right. You know what I mean? It's like you are losing something. I think there's something about the interplay of like accepting the loss and processing the loss, and also getting, sort of not losing hope. Hope is a sort of a strange thing to contemplate in this arena for many people, but it does, hope cannot be contingent upon getting what you want.
Right.
It's more of a felt sense of like, there is more life to be lived. This structure that we relied on may in fact be changing, and we will have to process that. But at the same time, this capitulating to this, sort of the whatever it is that like, I feel like sometimes we're just being asked to just let it all go, you know what I mean? Or to fight back against something that we certainly can't fight against, but neither of those things is the only truth. And the truth is an ever evolving moment of nowness that we know how to come back to as yogis, and we have to just keep doing that so that we can meet each moment as it comes, which can feel so non-doing. You know, it can feel so like, I don't know, isolated or something, or whatever it does feel like. So I don't purport to have the answers. I just do know that staying vital, staying connected to self, making those boundaries, not taking in those like understanding when you're getting overwhelmed and being able to shift the energy inside yourself so you meet the moment in a better way. It's kind of like the marching orders as I see it for now, Yeah,
and just to expand a little in regard to marching orders, there is a fair amount of people coming together, which is a way that some people will feel more hopeful, right? That there are others who are having similar feelings and they're doing something about it. And you and I attended a online thing from Indivisible this past week, in which they were talking a bit about how they are organizing and trying to get people to be on the same page in structures that work. And they started, I thought it was very wise of them, they started at the sort of most informal level, like just you thinking about it, or just you thinking about how do you want to engage with anything, is the base level. And most of the actions take place there. And then there are more organized levels of doing that, right? Your individual action leads to something that's been more
collective,
more sorted out as a strategy, right? And so your action is feeding this strategy, and then maybe that bigger strategy leads to something that's a very big action, like the No Kings March was an example of that, right? Like these bigger structures, but that it's okay to be in any one of those levels of participation, right? And just figuring out like what is it that you are capable of doing is a part of what we would in yoga call self-study, right? Like if you are trying to do something and you feel like it's not enough, there are ways you can do more, right? If you're trying to do something and you're feeling overwhelmed already, it's okay to do the amount that you think you can do, including just
self-care.
being loving to other people around you is
being
a tremendous
loving to yourself.
thing. It's a tremendous form of resistance just to be happy. There have been this wonderful professor of authoritarianism at NYU, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, has a Substack called Lucid, and on that, she's described a lot of the kinds of activities that societies have done when they are under much more intense authoritarian rules than us. And one of those things is simply being happy, doing things that are showing goodness, wellness, living life, comedy, art, things like that.
Yeah, I've seen people who have been throwing themselves at this with everything they have, sort of turn to me and say, "Wait, is it okay if I, like just a good friend, like calling me up and saying, is it okay if I say no to, like, I'm already doing this, and this, and then somebody called me and said, can you do this one other thing? And I just said no, and I just calling you to say, like, is that okay? And it's just okay. Do you know what I mean? It's really okay to do those things that are, we have to keep ourselves safe. We have to keep ourselves boundaried in a way that is, not shut down and closed down and like, ignoring what's happening, but in such a way that we filter what's coming in. It's like, well, you wouldn't like eat junk food to the extent that you were getting sick. You would make some choices about what food you were putting in on your plate. In the same way, I think we just really have to make some choices about what we're taking in from people, and even well-intentioned things can overwhelm us sometimes.
So like junk food is a metaphor for like watching the news and being aware of what's
yeah,
going
and just
on.
even just thinking that we have to do it all right now, like we have to take this all in. And I think one of the things that sometimes happens, we forget that we have a choice. It's really that simple. We get so down a rabbit hole that we forget. And those rabbit holes are very various, like if you grew up in a family where you're supposed to do good works for people all the time, it becomes a little hard to sort of sit back and say, well, maybe I need to do some good works for me.
Yeah.
But
I remember there's this quote, and it might be apocryphal, but I've heard that during World War II, I don't know who it was in the British government came to Churchill and said, we need to stop funding these art things because we need that money for the war effort. And he's reported to have said, if we're stopping the arts, what are we fighting for?
Yeah. If we're stopping the arts, if we're stopping creativity, if we're stopping helping people, caring, lending a hand,
teaching children love and compassion and what's
and even
right,
just like having an ice cream with your grandkids or whatever. It's just like, where are you in life and how are you living your life? And making yourself whole it can have a lot of different connotations for different people, but essentially I think we all understand that we're here to live a life, and we get a little confused about that, I think, sometimes. What's it for?
Part of it
brings up so many other little cans of worms.
And I think part of it is this perspective that we have as modern people who are so plugged in to these services whose job it is to keep our attention.
Yeah.
And so we are constantly being barraged with the news of what's going on, and every single time something new comes up, it becomes the thing that is in our face. So
you say pause, and you say, is this for me? And the other thing that you can do that's even a little bit more extreme is you can say, I'm going to unplug, and I'm going to take off my shoes. It's summer in our region, might not be summer elsewhere, but it's summer here. And despite the fact that it's sometimes 90 and then the next day it's 70, you can take off your shoes and you can go to the park, or you can walk around your yard, or you can, take a trip out of the city and just plug into the actual nature of things. And you can do that in larger ways and smaller ways, but throughout the day you can do, self-care practice. You can put, take an oil massage. You can, sit down and really notice your food and chew it and swallow it and remember about that we have to digest it. You can meditate. You can notice your breath and come back to your body and your breath. These are the tools that we use to address these larger issues. And we forget that we have the opportunity to use them. And, how we come to them is very individual, and how we essablish that sadhana, there's that word, right? Of practice. The practices that we do. My sadhana changes periodically. What works for me this week? What works for me today? What works for me this week, this month, this year, this age, right? This has always been what yoga is about, but right now we just have to remember it's still that. And that's part of living, and it is very valuable. as valuable as organizing, and we can also bring it into our organizing or into our things that we do in the world in a very intentional way, you know? So,
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
All right. Well, thank you, Wendy, for another fun conversation.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. And wish all of you the best, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah.
Support Peter's podcast on Patreon. We are doing some of our sessions on YouTube now, so if you want to watch us talk, you can check that out. At Peter's podcast on YouTube. We'll get you there. And have a great rest of your summer, and we'll keep chiming in as often as we can. Namaste.
Namaste.